Welcome back. My name is Kevin Rocket. Today we're going to be talking about the Quran and the Bible. And the reason we're going to be talking about the Quran and the Bible, quite simply, is because in the West in general and in the United Kingdom, we seem to have a big problem with the Muslim faith, i.e. the Quran. We have a lack of understanding, and therefore I myself had a lack of understanding about things. And so I started looking into it. I started looking at the Quran. And when I started looking at the Quran, I found a few things in the Quran that led me to go and look at the Old Testament, the first 5 books. And I'd like to go through that in this video. I'd like to go through what I've looked at, what I've read, what my understanding of it is, and where I think the problems begin. Why have I been looking for where the problem begins? I'm looking for where the problem begins because I don't think we can solve a problem unless we fully understand what the problem is. Now, once we understand what the problem is, then we can begin to look at the problem and say, okay, well, how can we open dialogue and how can we solve this issue that we've got going on? And I suppose that's just me being proactive. I don't like the division that we've got in our country, and I want to see it stop. I want to see us all understand things a bit better, where things are coming from, and then we can make decisions about the future together. So anyway, without further ado, I'm going to slide across and we're going to get into this, and I'm going to start going through some of the chapters and the verses that I've read from both books, and I'm going to talk to you about what I think and what I believe about what I've read. So I'm going to slide on over. I've had to don out the reading glasses for this one. Right, let's start with the Quran. Chapter 3, verse 3. Let's have a look and see what this got to say. I'm going to put it up on the screen for you. Right, so chapter 3, verse 3 is more or less telling us that there's another book, there's other scriptures, and it's called the Torah. Okay. So now let's go on and let's have a look at chapter 10, verse 94. Right, so chapter 10, verse 94 of the Quran is more or less telling us yet again that if you have any doubts, refer to the scriptures that came before. So now let's have a look at chapter 29, verse 46. Well, so I think the important bit to take from this is our God and your God is one and the only one. The one and only. Our God and your God is the only one. And so in the Quran it's telling us that there is only one God. Okay? So like for all of you out there who don't know what in the Old Testament how they referred to God, it was Yahweh. And so in the Quran we have Allah, and in the Old Testament, in the Torah, we have Yahweh. So essentially what the Quran is saying here to us is that Yahweh and Allah are one and the same. Okay, let that sink in for a moment. So now with that in mind, those three verses from those 3 chapters of the Quran in mind, the first thing I was compelled to do was put the Quran down and pick up the Torah, the Old Testament, and start looking at the Old Testament, which is exactly what I did. And that's what we're going to delve into just a little bit next. And I'm going to bring up some of the chapters and verses from the Torah, and we're going to go through those. Right, here we go again. Back on with the old reading glasses. Now we are moving into the Old Testament. Specifically, the book we're looking at the moment is Deuteronomy. And we're looking at chapter 5, verse 7. Just going to pull that up on the screen. And no gods but Yahweh. You shall have no other gods before me. Now we'll bring up verse 8 on the screen. And so essentially verse 8 is telling us that you can't make a likeness of anything. No statues, no nothing like that. And so then we go on to verse 9. Now verse 9 is a telling one. Verse 9 is a very telling verse in the Old Testament. And, you know, if this one line here for I, the Lord, your God, am a jealous God. I'm a jealous God. Wow. Right, so we're going to close that down there. And I move myself back over into the middle of the screen, and then we're going to discuss some of this and what I feel about this. And yeah, I mean, I can tell you straight away, I'm not feeling warm and fuzzy. Not at all. Not feeling warm and fuzzy in the slightest. Yeah, I'll get over in the middle. Well, there you have it. So we've gone through a few chapters and a few verses of the Quran. We've gone through a few chapters and a couple of verses of the Old Testament. What do you think? Write your comments down below. I'd love to hear what you've got to say on this. I look at it all and I see big problems. To be honest with you, I see where the division begins, because for the most part, the Western world and the Christian faith has left the first 5 books behind. We don't really follow the first 5 books. We especially don't live and die by them, by the written word of the first 5 books. And just going through Deuteronomy, there's a lot of worrying stuff. And I'll be honest with you guys, I've looked a bit further through the Old Testament, and it's bloodthirsty. It's bloodthirsty. You want to look at chapter 22, which we will look at in our next video, because that explains a lot of the behaviour towards women and the way women are treated. You see, the thing is, the Torah, the Jewish faith, they seem to have moved on from some of the horrific things that it says in the Bible. I mean, I've had a good search around online, a really, really good search around online, and I can't find an event of even Orthodox Jews stoning a woman to death. They normally deal with it through the courts, and it's dealt with differently. So whereas when you go looking at the Muslim faith, there are some horrific stories out around. Whether they're true, unfounded, I can't say, but the stories are there. Whereas when you look at other faiths, the stories aren't there. So that suggests to me that some of these behaviours and these ideologies have died out a long time ago. So I'm just a normal guy who's looking at things, trying to look at things from a pragmatic, proactive point of view. I'm probably kicking a hornet's nest, probably upsetting hundreds of people all over the place with this, but I'm going to put it out there and I'm going to tell you what I think the problem with the Muslim faith is. The problem with the Muslim faith is the Old Testament, the Torah. There you go.